Coming up on this episode.
The next stage then, which is communicate. And I think this is where a lot of our listeners, leaders, managers and influencers out there could potentially be going wrong with the art of delegation. Because for me, it's how clear, what clarity are we given within the detail of what we're asking of the person we're delegating a task to. And as a result of that, do we double check it? Do you know what I mean when I say that? Because
I think the basic definition is just keeping it simple, isn't it, really, in a sense of when you're delegating, it's getting a other person to do and complete a task or objective that you need them to do, so mobilising and motivating them towards doing.
Today's podcast is about the Delegation Dilemma. I love this subject, if I'm honest. There's so many different views for this. We talk to people all the time across private, public and sports elite, and we always ask what's the biggest issue within organisations. One of the first things they come back to me with is, we are just so busy, we're stacked, we don't have time, we don't have enough hours in the day, days in the week, so on. It is our first podcast. I feel it's gone well. Thank you very much. I'll let the listeners be the judge, but hopefully we'll be back in the hot seats again.
Welcome to the People Performance Podcast. The People Performance Podcast is made up of 3 series. First up, we have the Leader Lounge episodes with founder of T2, Martin Johnson. Then we have the guest interview episodes. And finally, we have our performance episodes delivered by our very own T2 consultants. For now, sit back, tune in and enjoy the People Performance Podcast.
Good afternoon and welcome to the People Performance Podcast with myself, Scott Morrison.
I'm matey Rich McCarthy.
Rich, how are you doing?
I'm good. First one together.
It is our first one together.
Yeah.
This could be
amazing
or
terrible.
Yeah, well, we'll see. Like, you guys be the judge of this, but I'm sure we'll get along. So today's podcast is about the Delegation Dilemma. I love this subject, if I'm honest. There's so many different views for this. We talk to people all the time across private, public and sports elite, and we always ask what's the biggest issue within organisations. One of the first things they come back to me with is, we are just so busy, we're stacked, we don't have time, we don't have enough hours in the day, days in the week, so on and so forth. But for me, it's a case of, right, well, that might be to some extent, but does that come down to poor management, or does it actually come down to the fact we don't delegate effectively or consistently across the board to give yourself, you know, a realistic chance of delivering your day at its best and sharing that workload across some of the people who are more than capable of doing it or need to level up in the work that they're doing, and it can be used as a coaching tool. So Delegation Dilemma, we're going to break it down today. We're going to go through the review as a whole, sit in each section and talk to you about why we think it's important. Rich, obviously I'm starting with you, so a little bit of an explanation or your view just on Delegation Dilemma. Where do you think we should start with this?
I think the basic definition is just keeping it simple, isn't it, really, in a sense of when you're delegating, it's getting a other person to do and complete a task or objective that you need them to do, so mobilising and motivating them towards doing that. Yeah
Makes total sense. And I think there's a few different sort of sources out there at the moment. I think Martin's done a webinar, he's done a leader podcast as well, so there's a few different things in there, and I think between all 3 of the sessions, including this one, we should pretty much cover all bases, though we spoke when we was out for lunch about how we could potentially do a second view of who the delegate is and how they might receive that. So that might be a conversation for another time, but 100%. Something to consider.
I think looking at it from a different angle will surely help people out there, in a sense of we're always focusing on the leader's perspective of how to delegate, but looking at that from a followership angle of, like you just said, people being delegated to and how they can open those doors to then go back and get feedback, and so their potential and their objectives that they are delegated to, the more successful in, I guess. Exactly. So right, let's get started then. Let's jump straight in. So I'm going to ask you a couple of quick questions and walk through the idea of where it's at. So the Delegation Dilemma, as we're doing it now, not many people out there will recognise this. Some will, some won't. But there are actually 3 styles of delegation that we focus on within the Delegation Dilemma. I think prior to those 3 levels as well, it's recognising the mindset type that you have in front of you, and that will then help you pick a level of delegation for that person, that mindset in front of you. So the first one is execution, execute. So asking the receiver to do something in a certain way for the outcome that you want them to achieve. So, for example, I need you to do this in this way to achieve X, Y, and Z. Okay, so you as a leader have complete control of the input and the output.
Absolutely, and therefore the result, right?
Yeah.
Makes total sense. So complete execute. Level 2?
Yeah. So level 2 is when the leader enables the person who's been delegated to. The leader will be in control of the input, but then the output is handed over to that person who's been delegated to, right? So asking them to do something, giving them autonomy over how they do it. For example, I need you to do this for me. This is what I want, but you have complete autonomy to go and do it.
So then that leaves the final one, the third and final one, which is empower. So how does empower look as a level 3?
I would describe it as a leader, you're giving over complete control in a sense of the input and the output. So giving them full creative license over doing something, but you're still asking and controlling the outcome. So you're telling them what you need, but then you're handing over complete autonomy and control for them to get you to that point, right?
Yeah, now that makes sense. So we had this conversation not too long ago in an actual session. And one of the guys was asking me to break down how it works for them. So the way I described it was quite crazy. So level 1 essentially is, I'd like a cup of tea and this is what I want. Yeah. I want the kettle boiling. I want the tea bag stirring 15 times. I need sugar in there times 2. I need milk in there and it needs to look the colour of my skin. So they've had the water. I've literally given them every bit of information. Whereas the phase 3 is simply, I would just like a cup of tea. And they've got creative license on how that looks because they've already done it once, twice, 3 times before. It's a bit of a basic view, but you get the gist, right? Okay, cool. So 3 key views there. So level 1, execute, level 2, enable, and level 3, empower. Of all 3, you've got completely different layers to which the person that you're delegating to is to deliver on. And like you said at the beginning, having that view of which is of the mindsets you're faced with as to how you might then delegate. And that can be experience, tenure, repetition in the wicket for what that job might be as to how much freedom you give. And that's great because now you can sit there and go, okay, if they're at level 1, this is what I have to give them. If there's somebody who's been here for a couple of months or a few months, level 2. And if someone's been here a year onwards, here's a level 3 because you know what they're capable of.
Would there ever be a point where you, and I'm bouncing the question back to you, and if you've got someone who's been there so many years, would you still be able to execute to them? You can still have that moment where you choose level 1, right? If you've got someone who's
yeah. Oh, sorry, I understand. Yeah, I think, listen, everybody's different. I've been here 4 years now, and it's got to be about all communication as well. So you might ask me a question, and I might think, well, that doesn't make sense to me, but it just needs to be said different. So in that scenario, I'd choose level 1. That'd come back lots of times. Yeah. But if the communication, the clarity is right, which is obviously key in delegation, this is where then I can sit there and go, all right, I can go straight to level 3, and you can give me complete control. Yeah. So that brings us nicely into the next stage then, which is communicate. And I think this is where a lot of our listeners, leaders, managers and influencers out there could potentially be going wrong with the art of delegation. Because for me, it's how clear, what clarity are we given within the detail of what we're asking of the person we're delegating a task to. And as a result of that, do we double check it? Do you know what I mean when I say that? Because I've asked somebody to do a job and I've left them to it, and I just think what I've said's clear. But is it clear? Should I have stood there and asked them to sort of regurgitate what I've said and earn the clarity of what I've said for them to be able to go forward, right?
I mean, it's happened to me in the past when I've been in certain roles. I've been given a task and I've been given the autonomy and control over it. And because we haven't had that communication in between me being delegated to and me completing the task, when I've then gone back with the finished article, it's not been what that leader has asked for because we've not had that communication piece in the middle. Yeah. So because I've wanted to go away and do a good job, I've made this elaborate rebranding of a program, completely changed the content, and actually they just needed a colour change on some of the slides. But because they've given me a vague one top level liner, and I've taken that and not had that maybe open door policy, or for whatever reason, I've not gone back.
You've not been curious and asked the question either. Just to confirm, bang, can I ask it this? And I think, and again, for anybody who's met me or has worked with me, I'm an 8-3, so I'm strong and self-reliant. So someone wants to give me a task, as soon as you give me it, I'm out the door.
Yeah.
So I might not have asked the right relevant questions to be curious enough in the time to do it. I've heard what I think I need and what I think you need, and I've disappeared to go and deliver it to the best of my capability. But it's not having that communication. So this opens us up nicely to the challenge circle.
Yes.
Yeah. So the challenge circle. So obviously communication is key. It's always the floor of every outgoing task, to make sure the communication has clarity and purpose, and you're setting people to task effectively. So within the challenge circle, just walk us through the 4 key stages of that, please.
I think the first one is obviously when that delegated person is stepping into that challenge circle and opening up that door because of the open door policy. They need to have that discussion on whatever it is for them that they want to discuss with the leader, and as a pair, identify what needs to be discussed, which then leads them into that second stage of the challenge circle is discussing what is needed by the delegated person after they've identified whether it's a discussion on certain areas of the task, or maybe that person's not been too sure of the ask, or whether they're in control of that full autonomy, whatever it may be. Once they've identified what they need to talk about, it's going into that discussion stage and having a conversation so that they can then move forward and agree, the third stage of the challenge circle, agree on the next steps for that delegated person to go away happy, ready to go and chip away at the task. And once they've done that, they can align. And I think that align piece is really important before that person then steps back into the world of them doing the task. Right, are we both singing off the same song sheet? Have we had a discussion? Are we both happy? So you can then go away, because although that challenge circle is always open for that person to step into, I know certain leaders in the past and myself, we've all got that point of frustration where we go, hang on, me and Scott, we've identified, we've discussed, we've agreed next steps and then we've aligned, but I still need to keep going back to Scott. You're going to get frustrated with me, or I'm going to get frustrated with you, right?
And that doesn't make sense. So just to clarify then, 4 key stages for the challenge circle. Identify. Yeah. So where it is, what it is, and what we're moving forward towards. Discuss. Make sure we've cleared all decks. We know exactly what we're trying to achieve. There's clarity there. There's purpose there. Once we've agreed that, we can then be aligned in how to deliver the job, or in actually getting the job delivered as per delegation. And I think you're right. And I said, and this is maybe something we should discuss here, because when we talk about this, I often ask, right, who knows how to delegate? And people will put the hand up. Yeah, we delegate as leaders. Okay. And then ask the question, who's actually good at delegation? And then look at me through like squinted eyes as if to say, what do you mean? And I go, who's good at delegation? Who can allow delegation to go out but stay on the output? And what I mean by that to the listeners out there is, if I was to give Rich a job and feel as though I've detailed it effectively, I've given him clarity, I've given him purpose, I know exactly where he's going. He's going to have some challenge, but he's obviously got my support as well. But on the first offering of coming back with that completed task, as you've mentioned, I might sit there and go, well, it's 60% to what I wanted. Now I've got to support that element and go, door's still open, set yourself off on the delivery of that task for the second time round, see where you get to. I'm here if you need me. Comes back the second time, boss, right, I'm at 65%. We're on the right level. I just want to make sure before I go back out there, this works. For me to agree, disappear. Third time round, we're now at 78%. Fourth time round, we're at 85%. And at that point, many leaders will go, do you know what? I'll do this. I'll take this on. And for me, it's that discussion of, if I do that, who am I hindering?
Yes.
And what's the impact of that scenario? So to me as a leader, if I now, after all that time, have to take the task away from somebody and do it myself anyway, I've kind of wasted my own time again, because I'm going to go and complete the task. But secondly, how have I made my staff member, my team member feel by sitting there saying it's just not good enough and I'm going to take it back? But let me be clear on this. You may have listened to me say the percentage, and it increased every time. So for me, as long as that there's an increment of improved work, I need to stay in the fight, as long as that person's willing to stay in the fight for it to be completed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And I think everyone's percentage or pinch point within that moment is different, right? Because, you've got somebody might come back to you and you said you're expecting 60%, but if the brief hasn't been great and that person does feel comfortable coming back to you, but it's taken them a couple of days or weeks, it might be at 40%, right? It might be at different percentages. So I think the point there for leaders is to understand when you become frustrated as a leader, what do you then do? Because you mentioned a couple of times there, Scott, about task. Okay, is it hindering the task, or am I able to go, right, I've got time to have this discussion in the challenge circle with the delegated person because I'm trying to develop them as an individual or develop the team. So I think it depends what your priority is. Is it the task? Is it the team, or is it the individual?
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Am I looking more about my result and getting it over the line, or am I more about the development of the individual in case?
Because then your pinch point, your percentages or your frustration is going to be at different levels, right?
Makes sense.
If it's a task, like you said, you might be like, right, I need to take this back potentially, or I just need to get on with the task now. Actually, if it's about empowering the individual and building their development, you might be able to sit in that challenge circle a lot longer.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's definitely something to consider. And I think that's all part of that initial communication with said person. This is the time frame. We're talking about clarity here, right? So setting them to task. So what is the key elements they need to know? We have 10 days to complete this task. We have this to complete these resources, these times, these things out there that enable you to get over the line. So yes, again, going back to clarity of what we're trying to achieve by when. So who owns what are the actions, and by what time frame?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, awesome. That makes sense. So coming out of the challenge circle then, and back into the delegation circle. So hopefully what you guys were listening to this, you'll see an animation of how that looks in real life. So we'll have the delegation circle, then you'll see the challenge circle off to the side, and you can get a view of how that views. But we're back now into the delegation circle. So what's the next stage for that, please, Rick?
We're looking at recognition. So once that person has done that task and completed that task, it's, how as a leader do you recognise the task that they've done, whether it's in public, it's in private, depending on that person and mindset that you have in front of you. But why are you doing that recognition stage? What is that going to help that person in the future when it comes to delegating to them more so, right? If I ask you to do a task and we've had that communication and we've done all the alignment and discussion, and you come away and you do the task for me, and then there's no recognition there. When I come to delegate to you again, how are you feeling? What are you thinking?
No, it's a really valid question, and it's going to hit different people differently. I guess I am task oriented. I'll get the job done. I might not be overly fuzzy about doing it for you, but I'll get the job done because I know there's a task at hand, right? So I'll get the job done, but I'll be as simple, I'll be as basic, and I'll be as professional as I need to be to get that job done for you.
Yeah. And like you just said, then I don't think the word was fluffy in a sense of you might not need the recognition, but it might not be like me saying to you, Scott, you've done a great job, and recognising you, but it might be like just going having a discussion about what you've done in your task that's helped the bigger picture, so you can go, I recognise my piece and value in that moment rather than me giving you individual praise. It might be a case of, hey, look at what you've completed within the time frame, and look at how that's helped the knock-on effect within different departments.
The impact on the organisation outcome is the key thing. And do you know what? I'd probably thrive more from that.
So when I come to delegate to you next time, you go, do you know what? I'm on that because I understand I'm this part in the timeline.
I'm this cog in the wheel that gets us to the big goal at the end. Absolutely. Yeah, so, that makes sense to me. And I think, do you know what? Whilst we're talking about that, this is also key as a leader, manager, and influencer when we're talking with our team and the people we work with. And it can be peer-to-peer, whatever the delegation is, right? What is it? And how do we communicate our level of thanks? And how will they receive it? So do we have that interpersonal skill to recognise just how we should be giving that moment of recognition and how they want to receive it?
Yeah.
Absolutely makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, and then we're into the final stage, which would be?
It's motivation, to motivate. That stage is the final stage, and I think that's the knock-on effect. That's the domino after recognition. It provides that motivation, whether it's extrinsic or intrinsic, for the person to then, when you delegate to them again, they're motivated to carry on and do the next stage, right? Then they've understood the process, they know what's coming, especially when it comes back round to that challenge circle.
Yeah. Awesome. So just to swing that back round in
Yeah.
full loop. So in looking at the delegation circle, we've looked at firstly the 3 stages of delegation in relation to execute, freedom of execution, and complete freedom to execute, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's nice and simple. And then we came down into communicate. The communicate section then opens the door to what we call the challenge circle, right? The coaching circle, some may know it as, but the challenge circle. And in that, we're looking at how we identify, how we discuss, how we agree, and then how we align to ensure everything that we've said is laid out, clear, with transparency, absolute clarity to move that person forward towards the task or goal or deadline that you've dished out.
And I think it's really important to repeat that the challenge circle is there for the person who's been delegated to open up.
Yeah.
It's for them to open up that door to have that conversation rather than you as a leader. Because if the leader does that, what's it seen as?
Yeah, but I agree, but I also think it's good for the leader to sit down and go, at any point you have a question, a need or a want that I can aid you with in completion of this task, come find me.
Oh, 100%, but the ownership's on the person that's been delegated to.
They've got to be
isn't it?
brave,
Yes.
right? So those that are listening out there, if you're somebody who gets delegated to, be brave, be curious and challenge and come back and ask questions when you feel you're at a loss for where you're
100%,
going.
yeah.
If you've lost direction or you've lost point of what that flag on the hill looks like, absolutely turn back around, come find the leader or the delegator and ask those questions. Get yourself realigned, get yourself in agreement, and then go again.
Yeah.
100%. So then moving on from the communication, we're talking about recognize, and as Rich said there, understanding how to recognize certain employees, what it is they'll receive well, whether it's the fluffy, well done, thank you, much appreciated, or this is how this has had an impact on how the organisation, the team has moved towards its target or the output or the deadline date, whatever that might be. But that interpersonal skill to understand how to better recognise each individual will go a long way for that person. And, you're talking about dopamine and all of that type of thing being fired off in there, which is great. And then as a result of good recognition, these guys are now happy in relation to how they feel motivated to move forward into the next stage of delegation and wanting to take on the next slice of that pie.
Yeah.
Awesome. And I think for me, when we talk about delegation, it's possibly the best coaching tool or one of the best coaching tools, because it's such a great way to set someone to task, either as a collaborative or as an individual, and set them away on doing their things with that creative license, like we said earlier on. So it's a really good tool. So if we're not using it and we are finding ourselves up against some really tight timelines and we're starting to feel overwhelmed or we're drowning in work, at what point do you now need to look around you and use a resource of availability such as your team and the people that are there with experience and start shifting some of these jobs, some of these different tasks to different layers of people within your team and organisation? Yeah?
Yeah.
Excellent. Listen, Richard, thank you very much. It is our first podcast. I feel it's gone well. Thank you very much. I'll let the listeners be the judge, but hopefully we'll be back in the hot seats again for level 2 of what this is, and we'll look at it from the other side of the view, not the delegator, but the delegatee, and how that might work out. But in that time frame, guys, thank you again very much for listening to us here at the People Performance Podcast. If you have any queries, questions, please drop them in the comments and we'll do our best to come back to you as soon as possible. Thank you.
The People Performance Podcast, brought to you by T2.